Okay, so in this video, I'll try to create some simple report based on the current setup of our accounting system. Just start it right now. Okay, let's see where we're at. Right, so last time I just played around with some CSS just to fix the main navigation. Okay, we have a bunch of accounting codes and accounting entries. We have a nice side. Okay, why is the side menu not working? Right, okay, so we have a nice toggle here for the side menu. And we have a bunch of entries here. It's already February as of this recording. Okay, let's just add another accounting entry here just to recap whatever we have right now. Let's see. Okay, so let's say for general journal, some other test entry. Okay, so we have our accounting entry working. Let's say we bought something for 150. Okay, so let's say we have an entry like this. Okay, so let's see what we can clean up before we actually try to create a report out of this. Maybe one thing we can also do is to let's say modify certain values in our current record. For example, what if we wanted to edit the particular? And we're not using a typical form in this case, not your typical CRUD form, unlike what we have with our chart of accounts using the accounting code model. But rather, we might want to edit individual pieces of information for this particular record. Just to add a more sort of interactive approach in modifying details in our record. So for example, we want to edit particular, or let's say the date prepared. Well, date prepared should be constant. I mean, in practice, we should always record when this record was actually created. But let's just say we wanted to actually modify both date prepared and particular. Starting with particular. I believe this part is in the show page. So maybe what we can do is, let's look for the particular part. Alright. So maybe what we can do is, if the current accounting entry is pending, we might have a button that will invoke a pop-up where we can edit the particular from that pop-up and then save it, and then it should reflect accordingly. Okay, so let's start with that task. You can say accounting entry. If the accounting entry is pending, we can then put an edit button somewhere here. Okay, so let's have that as a link. href. Let's give it an ID. Actually, just have it as a button. Button. This one will have something like an edit right here. Okay, so only if the let's have this as a paragraph. Particular should be a paragraph. Okay, so only if the certain accounting entry is pending, then the button will appear right here. Okay, so let's give this an ID so we can reference it in our JavaScript. Let's just call this button edit particular. Okay, so aside from that, we have to have a modal. Okay, so a modal to edit the particular, and just copy one from new. So this one would be edit particular, and just change the ID here. Let's say this one is for confirm particular. Okay, we still have our class message here. Okay, and let's change our modal body. Let's put here particular. Input would be type text, and the value, okay, let me just remove this stuff. Okay, and the value for that modal would be the current particular of our accounting entry. So accounting entry dot particular, and let's give it an ID. So let's say input particular. Okay, so I think that's good for the modal. Okay, let's see how it looks like, but before that, okay, let's make sure we change the ID of the modal. Let's say this is the modal for edit particular, which we can reference in our JavaScript later on. Okay, so JavaScript packs in the show part, we need to have a reference for our button edit particular as well as our button confirm particular. Of course, for our modal as well, modal edit particular. And let's make it appear first. So we have button particular. Okay, so maybe for this session, I'll just focus on modifying details inside the accounting entry record, and probably record a second video, another video for the actual report. Okay, so I think the modification of details will have a lot of code in it, so might be better for us to separate the video for the report part and just leave this video particularly for editing a pending accounting entry record. Okay, we finally have our reference to modal. Right, and our behavior or our event is that whenever we click our button edit particular, let's empty our message and then make the modal appear. Okay, let's deal with that first. Okay, make sure that in our show page we also render that modal. So let's just copy that here, edit particular, see if it's the same. Name is the partial. Okay, so there we have it, edit particular, and let's try to run this. Okay, so there we have it, our edit particular, and you can see that it has the same value as our particular that we initially inputted for this accounting entry. Okay, so it will only appear if our accounting entry is pending. Okay, so let's add some effects to that. Okay, so let's add some effects to that. Whenever we click our confirm particular, same style as we have done with the other buttons. Well, first we get the value for the particular in the input, so that would be okay. Let me just see if we have input. Oh no, it's not input date particular, but rather input particular. Okay, I don't think we have it referenced yet. Okay, so we don't have it yet. Input particular. All right. Particular equals. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we can get the value for our text box by saying input particular.val. Okay, so now that we have our value here, let's make this disabled as well as the input. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, so once we click that, so both the button here is disabled as well as our input is disabled. So you can also put something like message HTML loading for some flavored text whenever we click the confirm particular button. Okay, so assuming that we get that value, we should be able to save it. We probably have an API that we can post the data to. Let's name this update particular. Although it might be better if we can have some generic endpoint to actually save all the necessary details. Just think about it. Something like URL update, wherein regardless of what parameter we pass, it should be able to save that field in that model. So maybe, okay, let's try that approach. Maybe save. Do we already have save? We don't have save yet, at least on our backend API. Alright, we don't have save yet. Or maybe update. Right, I think update would be more appropriate. Okay, so so the idea there is we want to have an endpoint that will capture, okay, regardless of what we're actually modifying, in this case particular, we want to have an endpoint to actually accept that key. And we can assume that that key is the same name as the field in our model. So what do I mean by that? Okay, so instead of having something very specific like particular params, maybe we can generalize this. Okay, well, first and foremost, we have to get the accounting entry. Right, and then we want to update the particular, but if we wanted to update, for example, date prepared, it might also, we might also have to have this more generic than having something very specific like this. Okay, let's do some research here. Send, I think it's called send. Alright, so we're still a noob here. so let's review what send does. Okay, so let's say we have a class with a method start. We can either call car.start or car.send start. It's the same thing, so maybe we can do something like, depending on the key that we pass to our params, okay, we could do something like, for every key in our params, we put a send. Okay, we assign a send according to that key. And assign that the value of our params hash. Okay, Does that make sense? However, if we do that, then it also means that ID would also be included as well. So okay, we could also probably do something like accounting entry update params accounting entry. Okay, wherein we're expecting a hash from the key accounting entry to bind according to the fields of accounting entry. So I think this could work, right? This would probably be a better approach. Let's try that. Without any error checking, let's just provide an API to pass a key called accounting entry that contains the necessary fields that we attempt to update to our accounting entry model according to the ID. Right. Okay. Without any error checking, let's try to see if that would work. Okay, so we assign a route. Let's just start the server. Okay, so in that case, whenever we confirm the particular, we have to build the parameters that we pass to that endpoint, right? So we probably have something like the following: data will be equal to, of course, we need the ID. Is it underscore ID? Right. Okay. So we need to pass the ID as well as the authenticity token. Okay, this one's wrong. It should be underscore authenticity token, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so we also need, oh, what's wrong with this? I think this should also be underscore authenticity token. Right. All right. Where was I? All right. Okay, so aside from the ID, we also need to pass the authenticity token. And as well as the accounting entry hash. Okay, so this one will look something like the following. Since we're just editing the particular, then it's the only thing that we insert here. Okay, so this is the data that we're expected to pass to the endpoint. So we can now call our ajax method. Okay, so the URL will be URL update. Method would be post. The data that we send is from data. For success, it does something. For error, it does another thing. Okay, no error catching yet, so you can just alert error here. But for success, we simply reload the window, right? Change first our message. Okay, and then we reload our window. Okay, so let's see if this works. Modified test entry. Okay, so we have an error. Let's check our server. Okay, so we're being blocked by the forbidden attributes error. Okay, which is actually a Rails, I'm not sure where it started, Rails 4 or Rails 3, wherein we need to whitelist certain attributes that we pass to our controller. Okay, so hidden attributes error. Alright, so one way to solve this is we can call authorize, or permit rather. You can have a method that would require a counting entry, and we can permit the following fields: username, email, password. Okay, so going to our controller, you can always turn that off, but just for good practice, let's call this accounting entry update params. And then from our params, we can require, in this case, the key called accounting entry, and permit, let's say, particular. Okay. And then we use that in our update part here. So instead of saying params accounting entry, we say accounting entry update params. Let's try that out. Okay, let's modify this a bit. After alerting the error notification, zoom out a bit. Okay, after alerting the error notification, we can, well, we need to put in a message here. But in any case, our button confirm particular will now be false, as well as our input. Okay, so we can click it again, essentially. Okay. Modification. Okay, so it now works, right? Some other modification. Alright. So now we can edit piece by piece certain attributes of our model. Let's also try for maybe date prepared, right? Okay, let's try the same approach for date prepared. So similar to what we have with our particular, the idea there is that if the accounting entry is pending, okay, let's just have this as somewhere here. Okay. Well, actually, we already have a bunch of buttons here. If accounting entry is pending, okay, we have these buttons here. So maybe what we can do is we can add another one. Let's call this button edit date prepared. So if we click this, we'll have a modal that will have the value of date prepared, and we can modify it accordingly. All right. Okay, so edit date prepared in our modal folder or directory. Okay, copy paste that. Let's change all the particulars to date prepared, except for the input. Okay. Okay, so we have several elements already added to our HTML. So we have button date confirm date prepared, we have our button date prepared, we have our modal edit date prepared, as well as our input date prepared. Which we should account to our JavaScript. Okay, let's see. Var button edit date prepared, var button confirm date prepared, var modal edit date prepared, and our input. Where would our input be? Okay, so let's put it here. Var input date prepared. Okay, our URL stays the same. Let's go ahead and reference it here. Button edit date prepared. Okay, so button confirm date prepared, and then we also need the reference to our modal edit date prepared. As well as our input. Oops. Okay, wrong spelling. Prepared. Okay, so same approach. Whenever we click the button edit date prepared, on click, okay, we have the modal show up. Okay, let's also make sure that we're rendering that partial. See if it works. Okay, so we have date prepared right there. Okay, we don't want it as an input box. We actually want it as a date input. So we say type is date. Okay, so you can have that nice calendar right there. Okay, so let's see. Now for the confirm, well, it actually looks exactly like this for the confirm particular. So you can actually copy this, paste it, and just change a few things. So instead of particular, all particular, change the date prepared, and then all particular with lowercase p, we change the date prepared, except for the one that we actually pass to our controller. Okay, so we get the value, we make the controls disabled. Okay, we post URL update. Okay, success reloading. Confirm date prepared. If ever we have an error, we make the UIs present again. And okay, so let's try it. So I want to change this from February 4 to, let's say, something else. Say February 3. Okay, it said success. Right, so it said success, but the date did not change. So what's up with that? So I think it had something to do with accounting entry update params. Let's see that. Okay, so we're only permitting particular. What if we also permitted date prepared? Try that again. Change this to February 3. Okay, and now it's February 3. Okay, so I guess what we've seen here in this session is we now have some additional functionality to modify certain pieces of our record via JavaScript using a single endpoint, which in this case is our update. Okay, our update URL, no error checking whatsoever, at least on this point. And then it attempts to update something from our accounting entry update params. Okay, we need to do this because we need to sort of permit only certain keys or certain keys, only permit certain keys for a particular top level key, in this case accounting entry. so that Rails doesn't actually block that request. Okay, I think this is called strong parameters. Okay, so just leave a note here for strong parameters, right? And this will only work if, or rather the edit elements will only work if the current accounting entry is pending. Right, so let's see if we approve this entry. Okay, so now that it's approved, the edit elements disappear. So it's for a menu. Okay, let's just format this before we commit the code. Date prepared. Alright, there you go. Alright, so very short update to add some functionality to our accounting entry, and then I'll probably reserve the next session for creating a report, since we now have, let's see our accounting entries. Okay, so we now have a bunch of accounting entries, 2 in January and 1 in February. All right. Okay, so let's commit this. Modify particular and date prepared for pending accounting entry.